My name is Jason Imms, and I'm the ex-Quality Assurance Director for Mighty Kingdom, which is a deeply painful thing to say, because I love that place, and I love those people. And leaving there was one of the hardest professional decisions that I've ever had to make. But sometimes change is necessary and change is difficult, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I kind of made it all fancy in the title, The Art of Intentional Improvement. But ultimately, it just boils down to the constant desire to do better today than you did yesterday. Over the course of my career, I've had the privilege to work with a huge number of teams in various industries at different points of maturity and with very different attitudes to change. So for those who don't know, I've worked in software QA for like 20 years, which basically makes me a dusty old skeleton on both games and enterprise software. I took a break for a few years in the middle to work as a games journalist for a bunch of different publications, which was a really big learning curve for me. But I got to see heaps of different journalistic teams deal with change in various different ways, but all facing the same challenges. I also ran my own QA consultancy for a couple of years, during which I worked with a huge number of indie studios and built some really wonderful games and helped them put good best practice QA into their workflows. And I think in order to achieve ever greater things, change is vital. Personal change and organizational change. And I think the two feed into one another. A community of any type that's filled with people who actively work to improve themselves will itself improve. And a community that builds into its culture the will to constantly assess how it's going and how to do better will encourage similar personal change from the people within it. You can't do one and get the other for free. You really have to do both. You want to surround yourself with people who are keen to do better. And for that, cultural change will be the product. Cultural change is natural and normal for any community of people, not just in the workplace. It can be scary, but you absolutely can't avoid it. I've talked about this at NZGDC before, but cultural change happens constantly. And instead of accepting that truth and learning how to take advantage of it, many organizations are really afraid of it. They say things like, let's find ways to protect our culture as we grow. And after the acquisition, our culture is going to stay the same. It must stay the same. All of our new hires should be culture fits. And that attitude, I think, is really understandable, but I really want to challenge people to think about it. Because your culture is going to change. So by resisting that change, you're actually unintentionally telling people who differ from your norms they're not really welcome. That new ideas are not encouraged if they're going to challenge the status quo and the way things are just done around here. That if any aspect of your culture makes someone uncomfortable, get used to it. Because making things better just isn't something we're interested in. So I think that message is really dangerous. And so to the leaders in this audience, I want to challenge you to think really hard about it. Because guess what? Your culture is going to change whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter whether you're adding one new team member or scaling from 20 to 200, your culture will be affected by the new personalities in the room. And it's a good thing. It's not easy. It's often very difficult. But it's a fundamental truth, in my opinion, that a diverse and flexible community is a healthy one, a resilient one. Your culture is not just changing, it's expanding, it's maturing, it's growing up. So how do you embrace it? How do you guide it in directions that help you achieve your goals? My number one recommendation, and the foundation of every other recommendation I'm going to make in this talk, is to move toward discomfort. This was the catch cry of one of my mentors, and it really stuck with me. In order to make any kind of positive change, you have to bravely move towards discomfort. You have to take risks. You have to be willing to have difficult conversations. You have to be willing to own it when you make mistakes. And this is the core of any change framework that you want to implement in any context I can think of, from personal change to organizational change. If you can learn to do it confidently and engender this notion in the people around you, you give them the ability to confidently stand up and say something when they can see something that could be better. They can push back or suggest alternatives to top-down change. that's been proposed, and they can help find a better solution as a group rather than just doing as they're told. And I think, speaking personally, getting good at this gives people the courage to tell someone when they need help, or to stand up and state their needs if someone's doing something to hurt them. From a team perspective, any project management framework you implement should understand this concept. I think Agile gets it. Having really short cycles between planning and execution and retrospective activities inherently teaches your people to constantly assess where they're at and how they might do better. Constantly moving towards discomfort means small, uncomfortable things get solved fast while they're small, before they have a chance to turn into huge problems that are much more challenging to fix, if not impossible. So, move toward discomfort. Have a tough talk. Be clear and upfront, because clear is kind. Don't let discomfort fester. Move toward it and get it sorted. I think if you're facing a really big decision, like I have been recently, think about which of the options ahead of you make you the most uncomfortable and move toward that discomfort. Push through it to the values that sit behind it and the values that are being challenged by that decision. And once you understand the discomfort, you've got some distance from it, you'll be in a much more powerful position to make the decision. It's all much easier said than done, of course, standing up here and just doing a talk about it, but it's something I've seen pay off time and time again, personally and in my professional life. I still fail at it sometimes, often, but I'm working on it. I'm practicing strengthening the neural pathways between feeling uncomfortable with something and choosing to do something about it soon after, rather than finding ways to talk myself out of it. And when it's worked, it's absolutely repaired relationships. Not my slides though, sorry about that. Speaking of discomfort, let's pivot and talk about Agile. Raise your hand in the room if you currently use Agile workflows to make video games. Quite a few, awesome. And keep your hand raised if you believe that Agile is the methodology you should be using. Fewer, but still, it's still a good number, all right. Person who can't decide over there. What do you like about it?
I like that it's given changing, and it's not just like always knowing what's new.
Yep.
It's easier to pivot.
Yep. Ever changing and easier to pivot. Cool. What's something people dislike about Agile? Who's got a volunteer? Who wants to bag on Agile? Ali.
Too many meetings.
Too many meetings. Fair. No project management methodology is perfect. None of them. But to me, Agile is the least imperfect, because its job is to show up, teach you about yourselves, and get out of the way. The number of teams that I've worked on who have just really half-assed, terrible implementations of Agile based on half-heard ideas or half-read blog posts, it's really frustrating because it's just super common. Everyone kind of thinks they know what Agile is, but more often than not, people tend to not understand the underlying philosophy. Because Agile is not about whether you do stand-ups or 2-week sprints or 3-week sprints or planning or poker or retrospectives. The underlying philosophy, in my opinion, my take on it, is that you could be doing better than you are, and you need to be brave enough to admit it. Let that sink in for a sec. And this is a project management methodology, or at least the modern interpretation of it, understands that you're imperfect. You're a work in progress, and doesn't judge you for it. It frees you from the guilt and the shame of not knowing something or knowing that you could be doing better at it. Every single Agile ceremony should be built around the core tenet that a team of engaged and respected equals have highly effective conversations. And it's those conversations that are the lifeblood of great products. That every single person on a team, no matter their role, their discipline, their seniority, or their background, deserves equal respect and a seat at the table. Everyone deserves the chance to raise something that they feel could be improved. Everyone deserves the chance to offer up an idea for how a team might solve a problem. Everyone deserves a safe space to propose experiments for the team to trial over the next sprint or some other time box to see if it improves things. And I think that idea is one that I really love a lot. When it comes to process and the way that you work together, it's really helpful to build into your culture the concept of experimenting with change rather than complaining about problems and fixing them, trying to fix them. Because you're not trying to fix things necessarily. You're going to experiment with a change, observe the results of that change, and then decide as a team whether to accept the change and commit it permanently to your way of working. And if people are at odds about how a process should be handled, sometimes the argument results in a decision being made for bad reasons. Sometimes it's just about seniority or tenure. I'm the senior, I'm the lead, my way or the highway. Sometimes it's a flat vote. You've been outvoted, the team's chosen to go this way, and that's it. Sometimes it's got a real Agile nerd on the team, and they can quote the manifesto at you. And they say working software over a comprehensive documentation, so I'm not going to bother putting my notes in Jira. They're silly examples, but I think from that laugh, familiar ones. And they've got a pretty familiar negative energy to them, I think. So compare it to this. I was thinking about the excellent point that Ali brought up during Retro last week, and I have an idea. I propose we experiment with going back to doing stand-up every day, but moving it to later in the morning and only talking about blockers. No status, just raising blockers and identifying who might be able to help me fix things. Let's try it for a sprint or 2 sprints or 3 sprints and see whether the team feels like it's making a difference to how many features we're closing. See the difference? You're offering up an idea and you have room to explain what you're thinking, and you've given space to the team to ask questions or make changes to the suggestion, and you're committing to it together. Here's another example. Just do it by the book for a while. There's a concept called shuhari, which, according to my deep and detailed Wikipedia research, forms part of the underlying philosophy of the martial art Aikido. My cultural appropriation alarm bells are ringing, but hear me out. Shuhari describes the natural progression from beginner to absolute mastery of your craft, moving through 3 stages. In Shu, the first stage, you're just starting out. You don't know what you don't know. And I think most teams skip this step. So in Shu, you don't know what you don't know, and it suggests that you simply follow the rules. Do Agile the way it was written back in the 80s by a bunch of white dudes in a business meeting. Just do as you're told, and you need to spend some time there to shine a light into things that you don't know about the way that you're working, about doing Agile. Because then you can understand them. When it comes to Agile or any other methodology, what it boils down to is just follow the rules, read the manifesto and the 12 principles together as a team, do the daily stand-ups, do 2-week sprints or 1-week sprints, do planning poker and retrospectives, all by the book, even when it's frustrating and when it hurts. And once you've done that for some amount of time, you're going to start to identify the ways that the rules don't serve you. You'll know why, and importantly, you'll be able to talk together about how they hurt, what's frustrating about them. And you'll come up with well-informed ideas about how you might experiment with breaking some of those rules. Instead of just assuming that 15 minutes every day seems silly, let's not bother doing daily stand-ups. And so now you've made changes to these rules that suit your context, your clients, your people, and you can move into the next stage, which is called Ha. In Ha, you detach from the rules and you're going to digress. An example, because our team's split into multiple time zones, we believe that daily stand-ups are more harmful than good. So we're going to experiment with using other ways to gain alignment and identify blockers every day until we settle on something that suits us. Or we've tried planning poker, but actually we hate using story points because they're confusing. So we're going to use hours instead because we think it makes more sense for us, and we bill in hours anyway, so why not? So now you're customizing your way of working and you're making it fit you, and it's going to get increasingly comfortable. It's going to get further and further out of your way, allowing you to focus more and more on just doing the work, which is kind of why we want these practices in the first place. Once you've done that for a while, you'll have chopped and changed the rules so much and so effectively, you can move into this final stage called Re. In Re, you've completely thrown the rulebook out the window. You're separating yourself from that original manifesto-ass Agile. Nothing good has ever had a manifesto, right? And what you're left with is a way of working that's ideally suited to your team's culture and context. It's open to change from every member of the team. It's yours and no one else's. It's still operating on the Agile philosophies, but it's not Agile anymore. It's something else. It's unique. And I think that's really powerful. And if you don't know where to start, find someone to teach you. Spend the money, invest the money in a consulting crew that might be able to come and spend some time training your team. We recently did some training with a company called Organa, who were really transformative because they didn't just show up and make us do a certification. They came and learned about the company and our people and really customized the training. And it was really magical. I've worked with them twice over 2 different jobs. But that could be really transformative because they're an external voice. And everyone will listen generally more to an external voice than an internal one. All right, let's move away from businessy Agile stuff and get into the personal stuff. Before I start, I really want to acknowledge privilege. Obviously, every single one of us in the room have a different perspective on life, on intentional change, on unintentional change, on unwanted change, on change that you hate but feel you're forced to make just to be able to safely move through the world. I fully acknowledge my privilege as a straight white cis dude, especially as someone standing in front of you today to talk about self-improvement. There's just a lot that I haven't had to deal with in my life, or even think that much about. So I'm really thankful you're here. Intentional personal change is a lifelong process. At the top of the talk, I said, change is all about wanting to do better today than you did yesterday. And this is something I talk to my kids about all the time. I don't need you to be magically amazing at this, and I know it's hard. Just try a little harder today than you did yesterday to not belt your sister for singing while you're trying to read or something. But the thing is that I'm a massive hypocrite. I've never been one to get up early and meditate or read self-help books or sit down and really think critically about all the parts of myself that I want to make better. That sounds terrible, actually. Why would I want to do that when I can just roll out of bed and keep doing the same stuff that I've done every other day? Hasn't gotten me into trouble yet, said the straight white bloke. Well, unfortunately, many people won't take the time to consider self-improvement without some kind of catalyzing event, and they're often really painful. It was true for me, and it wasn't until I went through a really difficult time in my life that I was forced to. I didn't decide to. I was forced to take stock of where I was and compare it to where I wanted to be, to who I wanted to be. While I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, I'm thankful for the lessons that it taught me and the resilience it forced me to develop, whether I wanted to or not. It's given me the motivation to find methods for self-improvement that I can actually stick to. I think trauma gives us superpowers. We didn't ask for them, but now that we've got them, let's put them to use. So I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just a QA guy. So it's very easy for me to imagine myself sitting in this audience and wondering right alongside you why I'm up here doing a talk on such a broad topic. I also know that my life experience isn't universal. No one's is. So it's up to each and every one of us to understand our own desire for change and our biases that might keep us from the types of change that we want for ourselves. And I've always struggled with this really, really common quote. It's super grating, and I can't believe I'm about to put it up on a slide at a conference myself. But someone went, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This is widely attributed to Austrian psychologist and philosopher Viktor Frankl. I don't have a problem with the quote itself. The idea is really magical. What I hate is the way it's often wheeled out in self-help content like a super simple fix for all your problems. Simply choose to react better. There, you're a good person now. Well done. But what do you mean there's a space? Like, how do you get access to it? By the time I've got the clarity of mind to go looking for a space, I've already reacted, and now I have to put out those fires. So this drives me insane every time it comes up. I mentioned earlier that I went through some tough stuff a while ago. During that time, I took an online course based on a really wonderful book called The Happiness Trap by Dr. Russ Harris. And it's kind of right there in the title. the underlying message of the book is that society conditions us to think that we should be constantly chasing happiness, that we should try and feel happy every day. And if your experience doesn't line up with that, then you need to do something about it, or maybe there's just something wrong with you. And I think that sucks. I think it's really unpleasant. The book talks about the fact that the human minds and human bodies experience the whole spectrum of emotions, and that's okay. It's not it doesn't give you a bunch of tools to try and suppress the bad emotions and help you get back to the good ones. It's about accepting whatever emotion you're feeling right now in the moment, understanding what's put you in that place, accepting it, and committing to doing something good with that, whatever that might be, but intentionally. It uses a common technique called grounding or anchoring. Is this familiar to people? It's a common mindfulness technique. Yeah. It's built around that quote from before about finding the space between stimulus and reaction. So let's say I'm feeling really anxious about something, like doing a talk. What I can do is do some grounding to help me get a handle on it, help me understand it. So you close your eyes, you take stock of the physical things that you can sense around you, things that are real, things that are true. And you flood your mind with demonstrably true things to help quieten the noisy and often untrue things that anxiety drives in us. And so as an example, like when I wriggle my toes, I can feel my shoes around my feet. I can feel this podium. It's wooden and not cold for some reason. It's quite hot in here. And I can, my tummy's kind of swelling a bit because I'm doing a talk. My palms are a bit sweaty. I'm feeling anxiety. G'day, anxiety. You're back. It means I can observe, because now that I've noticed that I'm experiencing anxiety, I've intentionally noticed that, I can observe that my heart rate's quite elevated, and it's also kind of contributing to that sweaty palms. And now that I'm grounded and I've shaken off that heightened anxiety swirl, I'm back in touch with my body again. It's time to consider what it means for me personally to feel anxiety and to feel anxious. I know that when I'm anxious, I tend to jump to conclusions. I tend to be more likely to assume the worst about interactions with others, and I tend to shrink away from responsibility and retreat into quieter tasks that don't require others' input. All right, now that I know all that, and I know all that about my history with anxiety, I need to choose to make a move. I can make a choice that will either move me toward the life that I want to lead and the type of person that I want to be, or a move that will take me away from it. What towards moves and away moves will look like differ for everyone. Let's say you want to be the kind of person who's really fit and really healthy and cares heaps about the well-being of the people around them. For that kind of person, a towards move might be going outside, going for a walk, getting the heart rate up a bit, and while you're on the walk, have a bit of a think about what's triggered your anxiety today. And for that type of person, an away move might be to have some kind of horrid, delicious fast food and just wallow in it. But the point is that they've made a conscious and intentional choice. Sometimes you might kind of go through this process and say, you know what, I'm gonna do an away move today because I want to wallow in it. This sucks. It sucks, and I want some takeaway food. I'm gonna do it, and I've chosen to do that. I haven't reacted and gotten Uber Eats out. I've made the choice to do this, and with that choice, I can make sure that I'm kind of keeping track on how often I'm making that choice. And maybe next time I'm feeling anxiety, instead of choosing to make an away move, I will be more firm with myself and make a towards move. So I think that's really powerful. But it still doesn't solve the problem of how do we have the presence of mind and the time to do what I just spent 10 minutes describing to you before I've reacted. And the key that unlocked that for me and turned it into something really life-changing is this really simple little tip. You don't only use these techniques when you're experiencing undesirable emotions. The way you get access to that space between stimulus and reaction is through neuroplasticity, by training your brain to slow down and not jump straight to a reaction, but to notice the feeling you're feeling, prompting you to anchor yourself and turning those things into habit. When you start out, you might only ever notice that you're experiencing an emotion every now and then. And at this point in most of your lives, you're pretty experienced at not noticing them and just reacting to them. Sometimes you'll anchor yourself and not be able to decide what would constitute a towards move or an away move, and you'll just kind of feel stuck in the middle and not be able to decide where to go. Most of the time, you're just going to get stuck in an undesirable emotion, you're going to react unconsciously to it, and then you'll feel stupid for not having done all this cool stuff we just talked about. But as we all know, practice makes perfect. But for me, just practicing using these techniques when I'm feeling low or down or upset or anxious had meant that I'd unconsciously created an association between trying to feel good and doing good things for my brain and being in a bad place. And so, of course, I didn't develop good habits around it, right? So during the video course that I did about Dr. Harris's book, he said something that really bowled me over. He said, next time you're feeling joy or contentment or just happiness, take a moment and anchor yourself. And then choose a towards move. Something you can do intentionally with that emotion. Because anchoring isn't just for those negative emotions. You can practice it at any time. And I'd never heard that before. I've only ever heard grounding and anchoring used to describe, to help, to make yourself feel better. And I'll never forget the first time I tried it. We'd just taken our kids to a new Tasmanian exhibit at the Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery called Mapia Lumi, which is a Palawakani phrase that means around here. And the whole exhibit is about Lutruwita, Tasmania, where I come from, and what's really special about that place. It's a super exploratory and interactive exhibition. So all five of my children were off joyfully exploring. And my wife and I were just sitting off to the side, holding hands and just enjoying each other's company and watching them go. G'day, happiness. It's good to see you again. Sorry. I realized that I had a grin on my face from ear to ear. So I took a moment, I breathed, I paid attention to how contentment and joy felt in my body, how it affected my heart rate, how it affected the muscles in my face. The absence of those ever-present feelings of a churning gut and an anxious heart. I could hear Amy laughing, I could see her smiling, and I could feel her hand in mine. And I was in absolute heaven. And I had the chance to pay attention to it, to actually pay attention to how good it was to be there. I'll continue working on it, of course, for the rest of my life, because I still make mistakes, I still unconsciously choose away moves, and I still talk down to myself when I do. I'm far from perfect, but that's okay. I am a work in progress, and I will try and do better tomorrow. Thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes for questions, is that right? If anyone wants to talk now, we can have a little therapy session. If you do, raise your hand. Over here.
I don't need a therapy session.
Sure.
I just wanted to thank you for being so vulnerable with us, and just to endorse what you're saying. I have a master's degree in psychology, and this is backed by everything that I learnt during that degree. So ngā mihi nui te, thank you so much for what you've brought to us today. It's really a real treasure.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear. Any other questions? Or any questions? It's fine if not. It was a kind of weird thing to end on. Oh, there's one over here.
Sorry, I don't know if this is going to be like awkward after all the really emotional stuff that you share, but you know, we all humans, right? We all go through these things, and sometimes we have, you know, bad days, we're not doing as well, and you know, we still have to work. We work together with other people that are also humans, that sometimes are going through things. Have you found any ways to kind of keep that humanity at work and sort of extend that understanding to other people and kind of accompany each other on those bad times so that you can, you could, it's not like productivity, what you are after. You're just after feeling comfortable and supported at work, and yeah, just don't fall apart, basically.
No, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to be quite dependent on the culture of the community you're in, whether it's at work or anywhere else. And it also depends on the kind of person you are and the kind of leader your leaders are. Like, they're all different. Personally, I like the idea of kind of extending humanity, and actually trying to be friends with the people I work with and the people who work for me and who report to me. And a lot of other leaders don't like that idea. The idea of being friends is too risky with staff. But yeah, it can be risky, it can be difficult, but I honestly believe that if I'm close to my people and they therefore trust me, if I tell them they need to do better at something, they'll actually hear it. They won't feel like they're getting in trouble. I'm just a friend giving them some advice or asking a question. So I really like that idea. So in one-on-ones with my staff, I try to get to know them and their lives, and I try to quite strictly stick to half the one-on-one being business talk and half being life talk. And sometimes it gets really full on. Some people take advantage of the life side a bit, and we have to pull it back a little. And there've definitely been moments where I've overextended and I've gotten a bit too involved in some people's lives, which was a really helpful lesson to learn. Not an easy one to learn. But I still think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. Get to know your people and be mates, and you'll probably make better stuff. Cool. Anything else? We did talk about Agile there. You can ask Agile questions too if you like. Tim?
Actually, I love the observation about talking about protecting your culture being something that's actually quite toxic, but framed in a way that sounds kind of positive or admirable, but is actually a red flag. Can you think of any other kind of workplace things that have that same read where they feel like they sound progressive or good, but they're actually hiding something a little bit more insidious? I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, anything can be toxic, right? Go.
We're a family here.
We like to work hard and play hard. Yeah, I mean, there's so many of the cliched ones. I think the protecting our culture one, it's just so common. Like, every single job application, people talk about culture fit being a really important part. Like, it's really vital for us that we find people who are good culture fits. And I think there's value in doing that. I just think we don't think about the ways that it costs a lot of people who are kind of in that more minority space. And you can hide a lot of sins behind that. You really can. Like, you can have a young woman in her 20s applying for a kind of high-powered job, and you can kind of say she's not a good culture fit when actually you're making really yucky decisions about what life choices she may be planning to make over the next 10 years. You know, you can bury a lot in that. So I don't have a solution for it. I'm just kind of raising the red flag. I do have a solution. Think about it. Like, actually think about it. Like, we're just completely habitual in wanting to kind of have good culture fits. And I think that zone, that HR, especially job ad zone, is a really good place to do some of this work. If you can put salaries on the job ads, and if you can be really open about the kinds of people you're looking to bring into the business and the kinds of diversity you're looking to add to your business. Like, if you do a lot of the work there, that some of that cultural change will flow out from that, I think. To answer the question, I can't think of any other good examples off the top of my head. Hi.
You mentioned, thank you, first of all. You mentioned going towards the discomfort. Did you have any suggestions on resources or ways to kind of facilitate group discussions where we are moving towards that and unpacking the values behind it?
Pretty much everything Brené Brown has ever written is worth a read. If you can, especially if you're in a leadership position, try and go and do the Dare to Lead course. There's a 2-day course that thousands of providers will do around the world. It's pretty full on, like, it's a very taxing emotional thing. But I think if leaders in a business are doing that course, they're much more likely to come back from it with some of these things in place, and they're less likely to bury discomfort and move away from it. But I think we all need to do it. It's not just about the leaders in the business. So if you can if you have a library at the office, buy some Brené Brown books and put them in there. They're really good. They're also really cliched though, like they're really common too. But no, I got all of that from someone who mentored me, who presumably had read a bunch of Brené Brown books. Hi.
When you were talking about going toward the discomfort, you were also talking just before about like if someone is making someone else uncomfortable, and it's like, so there's obviously like good and bad kinds of discomfort, right? How do you figure out that this is discomfort you want to walk towards and not walk away from?
Yeah, well, that's an awesome question. Moving toward discomfort doesn't just mean stand up for people. It doesn't just mean go on the attack when you see someone doing something wrong. But it can mean that. And if you're in a position of privilege to be safe to do that, then you should, right? If someone's being mistreated, you should stand up and say something. But for me with this job change, it was really uncomfortable, and there was lots of discomfort in making this decision. And I had to kind of move toward that discomfort and really try to understand what it would mean for me to leave this place and these people. And it wasn't fun. It would have been much easier to just stay. But I knew that if I didn't move toward it, there's no way I could experience new types of growth that I'm not already aware of. So I guess the advice is really broad and really general, but wherever you can, move toward discomfort. Not kind of bust the door down and get real aggressive with it. Just go over there and see why it's making you uncomfortable. If someone says something at work that made you a little bit uncomfortable, rather than going, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, try and find a way to maybe bring it up. You don't have to tell them they're a bad person. You don't have to be mean to them about it. But just letting it go is moving away from that discomfort, right? And I'm deeply thankful for the times that people have come to me and said, you said this thing, or you used this phrase, or you used a hand gesture or something that actually kind of has this context to me that maybe you weren't aware of, and please don't do that again. And thank goodness they kind of trusted me to come and say that. I'm deeply thankful for those people. And I had to move toward that discomfort and try and do the hard habit changing work that, as a privileged white guy, I should try and do more of. I have no idea how much time we've got left.
It's 3:30.
Okay. Wow, is that still ages? What time is it? Oh, wow, that is ages. Did I finish super early? Awesome. Well, unless there's any more pressing questions, you can maybe have an early minute. Anything else before we wrap up? Hi.
Hello, thank you for speaking your truth. It's really nice.
Cheers.
Vulnerability in workspace. Yay or nay?
Yes. Within reason. For you, like within your personal comfort zone. Vulnerability in leadership, very yes, in my opinion. Leaders who are vulnerable encourage vulnerability. They're more likely to accept their own weaknesses and accept their own mistakes and own them, and then actually do something about it. But not everyone has to be vulnerable all the time. Like, the concept of professionalism is a really complicated one, because it can be used like a club to tell people to stop being vulnerable and bringing emotion to work, or letting their lives affect their workplace. And it's often used as a direct counter to vulnerability. And I really don't like it, because we can't be professional all the time, and our lives will affect our work, and our work will affect our lives. They're intertwined. So work-life balance isn't about having a good number of work hours or whatever. It's about letting life in to work and telling people, I'm sorry, I'm not particularly effective today. I've got some stuff going on in my personal life that's really full on. And in a safe place that can be accepted, and you make up for it later, you know? So generally speaking, yes, I like the idea of vulnerability in the workplace, but I also understand that it can be really risky. And I also acknowledge that for kind of less privileged people, it can be very risky. And maybe putting up some good walls and good boundaries, and that's true for everyone, Everyone should have good walls, good boundaries, but you might need more, or you might need stronger ones, depending on your personal context. Does that answer the question? Awesome, thank you. Anyone else? With our 20 minutes we have remaining? Hi.
Hi, my question is, like, as a student, I don't really have much professional experience, or like, what is a professional, like, to be like professional around others, like, apart from like being respectful and just being decent human, what are the other basic things to just do?
That's a really good question. I mean, you're off to a good start, right? Like, be a good person, be a good human. That's a really good start. I mean, like we talked about before, moving toward the discomfort of vulnerability is probably good. So if there's people in your life who are having a difficult time, it can be real easy to give them a little pat in the back and not engage too much. If you've got the energy and the headspace to do it, giving them a little bit more access and a chance to open up a bit more can be a good gift of energy, a good gift of your time. But also, one thing I really like about vulnerability is you give the people in your life who care about you the gift of caring for you. So if you need help, like, if you don't have to be in a really terrible place, but if you're just not in a great place, open up about it, especially for men, right? Like, tell a mate and let them in and take a chance that they'll be cool with it. Give them the gift of a chance to give you some care, and in return, they will probably grow. And then maybe they'll come to you next time. Like, it's a really broad answer again, sorry. Cool, all right, I think we might call it there. Thanks everyone, this was really fun. Cheers.